I think if you're out to make money and that's your sole goal, then you lose because it's very rare that you make the most money and hard to beat Elon. And so by default, you're going to lose that goal.
Peggy Steyer is the co-founder and managing director of Razor's Edge Ventures, where she invests in growth stage technology and national security companies. In the past 5 years, her portfolio has generated an incredible $1 billion in shareholder returns, placing the firm as a top decile performer. Earlier in her career, Peggy co-founded and led Blackbird Technologies, acquired by Raytheon for $420 million, and Raven Wing, acquired by Boeing. Peggy serves on the boards of Corsia, Dark Wolf Solutions, Velocity, Black Sea, and Veros Technologies, and is a board observer for Procia. She holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from California State University, Northridge, and a master's in technology management from the University of Maryland. Her entrepreneurial spirit emerged early. She built a fortune-telling machine in high school, foreshadowing a career defined by invention, leadership, and impact. Let's dive in. First, Peggy, welcome to Next. It is so great to have you here.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Michael.
Full disclosure, in the Tiger 21 vein, Peggy and I know each other just a little. Our sons played lacrosse together 15 years ago at Princeton. And another full disclosure, I'm a proud investor in Peggy's fund. But let's start at the beginning, Peggy. How would you describe your childhood? What shaped your entrepreneurial ambition and work ethic?
So I was a Navy junior, is what they call them instead of Army brats. And my dad bounced us from coast to coast as he went through his career. I think I went to 21 different schools, which when you're shy, as I was a shy, nerdy kind of kid growing up, and you have to stand up and say, well, my name really is Peggy, even though it says legally it's Mary. You just kind of have to throw yourself into that and get it done, I think. So that was a big impact on how I just approached life. You just take a step and another one until everything's sort of in shape.
So if your father was in the Navy, is it fair to say you did not come from a family of entrepreneurs?
Definitely not in the recent past. My
Uh-huh.
grandmother was pretty entrepreneurial. She was a doctor's wife and actually won the Medal of Freedom from President Bush for charitable works. But she had an entrepreneurial spirit, I would say, sort of
Wow.
quiet power behind the throne.
What led you to study computer science and technology management?
I was a math person, and I always viewed getting a computer to do what you wanted it to do as magic. Sort of it's a kind of precursor to the AI stuff now. I think back then there was something called ELIZA, which basically picked out English patterns in speech and sort of repeated it back to you. And that's what my fortune telling program was based on. No real intelligence behind it. It was more pattern matching and things like that. But he would ask someone, it would say, what's your name? And you fill that in and it would address you as that from then on. And you'd hard code it in, oh, Jenny, I think that Sam likes you. It's all the silly high school stuff. But it was a blast and it was pretty popular for those reasons. But it was all computers doing magic.
And were you able to make any money doing that, or was it just the creation of something really interesting?
It was all for fun. It
Uh-huh.
was all.
You've surrounded yourself with lots of entrepreneurs. You back them now through your fund. Many entrepreneurs point to a moment when they realized they wanted to become an entrepreneur, or as we know from many Tiger members, they needed to become an entrepreneur to prove something. Did you have such a moment at any point in your career when you decided you really wanted to be an entrepreneur, and why?
I don't know if it was a conscious. I worked for a small company, English company in Southern California that was bought by British Petroleum, who was then the largest company in the world. And they were buying up their next new things, the big, what they thought were going to be the huge companies of the future. And they bought our little company. And it was really fascinating. They moved us from California to Virginia. And we supported all kinds of, it was a CAD CAM conversion kind of company, supported all kinds of companies international. And it was really fast growing, really interesting. And they invested a lot in this company, hiring all kinds of people, and it got up to 150 people from 20 people in a year and a half. And then they just changed their mind and fired everybody. So it was like one day seeing like a firing squad for all your friends. and they kept me and one other person to close down all the accounts for the customer support for the rest of the year. And it was just, I just thought at that point, there has to be a better way to run a company. It wasn't a money thing. It was just a change of direction. And so at that point, I just kind of made it on my own.
A lot of our colleagues in Tiger had childhood issues. They came from broken homes, they had childhood illnesses, something about them wanted to prove to the world that they were better and could be more productive than they thought the world saw them. And of course, that's not the only model that brings people to entrepreneurialism. Sometimes you're not trying to change the world's view of you and say, I can do it, but maybe it's you have an idea that you're so passionate about that you just want to change the world. The point of this is that many people think most entrepreneurs just start businesses to make a lot of money, but it turns out that's not how entrepreneurs self-report their motivations at the beginning of the career. What were your primary motivations?
I think if you're out to make money and that's your sole goal, then you lose, because it's very rare that you make the most money, and hard to beat Elon. And so by default, you're going to lose that goal. And you're never really happy on that path. I think there's always more. You don't have the sense of, okay, I've finished. And so I think entrepreneurs are generally optimists that maybe don't understand what a hard journey it really is. And the world's better off for that. You sort of say, well, nobody's doing it. I can do it. Let's wade in, and just get it done. So I think that's very much the path that we've taken.
When you started Blackbird, can you even describe in one sentence what Blackbird did and then what Ravenwing did? What do these companies do, or did
Yeah.
they do?
So Blackbird was, I met my partner, founding partner in, our kids were in kindergarten together. And so he was in the CIA, and he was really a natural sales guy, really good at explaining hard concepts to people and to help them understand and get things done. And so I had sold a company fairly recently and going crazy, staying at home with the kids. And so I'm not a good PTA. I mean, I'd rather do a spreadsheet and do something they want to do in 6 months. So I harassed him and we started Blackbird. Blackbird's largely solving hard technology problems for the intelligence community and SOCOM. Those were, guys with a lot of hard mission and money. And, this is back in early 2000s or 1997, actually. So before the smartphone, early global war on terrorism, those kinds of timeframes. And there were some hard things that needed to be done. And generally in the national security world, things were done in a very bespoke manner. So our approach was, if something exists that can solve that problem, let's pull that into the solution and then, make the rest of what needs to be done. But let's start with things that are already in existence instead of starting everything from scratch.
You talked about in a prior podcast that you would work around the clock from time to time. Not many marriages can survive that. How do you think your husband dealt with that?
When you're CEO, your job is to take care of everybody else's needs to make sure they can do their jobs. I would clear everything out on Monday, and then everything else would be much more strategic and responsive for the rest of the week. So one time he said to me, we will just assume you're not coming home. And if you do, it'll be a benefit, a blessing. And that just hurt. That hurt a lot, because you think, we're in this together and we're raising the kids together. And I don't want them to grow up saying, hey, mom wasn't there. Because my dad was in the Navy. He was gone a lot.
Right.
And which didn't make us think any less of him, but he was gone a lot. And I want that to be the memory my kids have. So I consciously pushed to make sure I didn't work on the weekends. I made all their games. But my husband, I couldn't have done it without him.
You remind me a little of the show that was on TV recently called Lioness, where the woman is in the CIA, and that's basically what happens. Her husband says, well, we're not going to expect you for the next month, but when you want to come home, come home. And you realize what an incredible toll. And I think that's really one of the things that I suspect we both share, is that when you're a successful entrepreneur, people really don't appreciate the sacrifice and the discipline it took. And I've talked often about delayed gratification and something called the marshmallow test, but however you track it, delayed gratification is probably one of the single most important attributes of a successful entrepreneur who can delay at gratification. Is that something both you felt you experienced, and when you're starting new companies, one of the ways you understand the team is whether they can really make the sacrifice necessary to get to the other side?
For me, it's all about passion and the ability to work as a team. I don't look for the smartest person per se. Although, I work with a lot of programmers where you tease about, sliding things under the door to keep them fed. But as a management team or leaders of the company, I definitely look for people who have the passion to get things done and understand how important it is to take care of the people around them. So I think it's very different for different roles.
So at the time of its acquisition, Blackbird set an industry record on exit and roughly twice the industry standard, apparently. Your next company, Ravenwing, was subsequently acquired by Boeing. So when you're working with that people in a venture firm and you have what you've just described as sort of five key players that all form this core, what in a corporation would be called the C-suite, but in a investment company or just either the general partnership or however you define it, some things have to be common to the five of you for you to be successful. And you're all different people. What are the non-negotiables that everybody has to share in terms of either values, perspective, ambition? How do you know when there's that fit? And then what are the differences that you can tolerate and actually celebrate?
Well, so we dealt with this because we just added a sixth partner. It was the first time, adding in a long time. It's harder when you have a functioning team. And so you sort of look at yourselves and see what you do value. And one of the things is honesty. Loyalty is really important to us. And then passion for what you're getting done. Everybody works hard. I guess we take that for granted, but everybody's sort of very interactive, and we have a two-man rule. Usually we have two people on each board, and one person will take the lead and keep the other person in touch. But, different skill sets are needed at different points in a company's growth. So we kind of swap in and out and sort of deal with it in a sort of a community approach.
Do you know what the politics of your five partners are? And are you all of the same political persuasion? Or how do you deal with the differences in this polarized time?
I know. We try not to talk about politics. But no, I do know all their politics. And we're all largely aligned on that stuff. But it's more of a common sense sort of thing. I don't think anybody's like, I always vote for this party or I always vote for that party. It's much more of these people I think are moving forward. And moving the country forward, I think is much more how we think about politics.
Are there personal habits of yours that you believe have sustained your career over multiple decades that when you look around and see peers, you say, I've been more successful or as successful because of these particular habits or practices?
Michael, you often talk about how successful entrepreneurs draw on traits that don't always fit into traditional environments. I want to share more about an organization called understood.org, which helps those with learning and thinking differences like ADHD and dyslexia see those traits as strengths, not flaws. Understood's resources and community support allow families, educators, and individuals to navigate challenges in a way that unlocks real potential.
It resonates deeply with what we see across Tiger 21. Many of our members succeeded precisely because they think differently. When those traits are misunderstood, they can create obstacles, but when recognized and supported, they become powerful assets. We're matching donations this season up to $10,000, $100 per gift, to help understood.org continue this critical work. Visit understood.org to learn more, or muse.com/giving, MUUS.com/giving to participate. You can also find the link in the show notes.
I think you have to be comfortable with yourself. We talked earlier about postponing things. I do think you need to not neglect certain areas of your life. Like if you miss all your kids' games, I think you'll find a void later. And I've seen people really regret that. So being present for your children or your family and yourself, you have to do some sort of physical I work with a trainer because I won't work out. My husband will go down and work out all day long, but I can't. I have to have something set up, structurally that I'll show up because I'll postpone it. So, and then the work thing, to me, it's a stitch in time. So I'm always checking my phone. I mean, I put it down for a whole hour once. I'll check my phone just to make sure that there's no emergency, because I definitely think that, if you deal with something right away before it snowballs, it's so much more impactful, and less so at Razors than it is because I'm not the CEO anymore, than it was at Blackbird, because those things needed to be dealt with immediately. So I can actually go on vacation for a week, without having a satellite phone with me if I'm somewhere. But I think that you need to just be comfortable in who you are and stop measuring yourself against everybody else in the world, right? Again, back to if money's your goal, you'll never be the most successful. And if you keep comparing yourself to everybody else, it's just exhausting, right?
In the 80s and 90s, I was one of the early board members of an organization called Business Executives for National Security.
Oh, sure.
And it's still around.
Yep.
But in those days, there was a part of our agenda fighting fraudulent defense contractors who were staging videos that purported to take down helicopters when the video was falsified, and weapons that didn't work. And one of the things that's most unusual about the work that you do is their real lives at risk. And that places a kind of responsibility that I imagine at times might weigh heavily on people if they take their job seriously. How does that impact the culture and in your personal life, and how is it just something like an emergency room doctor that you eventually get used to, or do you ever really get used to the weight of the importance of the work you're on?
No, I remember right after 9/11 when we had insight into a lot more than most of the world did. And you'd talk to people from other parts of even the United States, and they didn't understand what an impact, how drastically the world had changed in that point. And I was not anxious, but so wrapped up in that. And it just occurred to me, just like sort of a breakthrough. It was like, it's so much better for the world, for everyone not to worry about national security and whether we're going to be attacked and all that all the time. Like, what kind of life is that to just, live in fear all your time? So I think what helps me is prioritizing, how can I make an impact? What do I need to do that? And then just enjoy living and the people around you, and, what we're actually trying to preserve in this world. And that's what makes life, interesting.
Do you ever feel like Jack Nicholson in that movie, A Few Good Men, when, I don't know if you
Can't
remember the
handle
movie?
the truth. Yes. Yeah.
How do you engage in polite conversation in a social setting when you have something like this on your mind? It must be, obviously anybody that does work like you, if they do it well, and any president or people involved in security matters where they understand the nature of the threats we're all facing, you don't want everybody to be distracted by it, but it isn't easy.
It's interesting. The things that you asked me earlier, what I was most proud of, and the things that I'm most proud of are things that nobody knows about. Like the things that we've
And you're
accomplished.
not going to tell us.
Yes, I think I would thwart it. But the things that, not only me, but like working with some of these, intelligence officers and Navy SEALs and, Army Rangers, and things that they do that almost nobody knows. And they just get them done and proceed. And the world's a better place because of that. I think that brings sort of a glow to you if you know that you don't have to. Who cares if more of the world knows that you were involved in something? In fact, the people that you see claiming success are rarely the people that actually were responsible for the success. So I think it's the doers versus the talkers. So I really respect those individuals and hope to emulate that more.
So it's not too early to start thinking about legacy. What do you hope people will say either at your funeral, whenever that day comes, or friends or colleagues who remembered you? What do you think your most unique attributes are that you would like people to appreciate you for?
I just want to have been seen to make a good impact on this planet, and the people on it.
Before we get to the tip jar, I always think about failure being one of the key parts of success. I would rarely want to hire somebody who had not at least failed once in their career and then had the resilience and the intelligence to figure out what went wrong and how not to duplicate that effort. Have you had any failures that you felt were really incredibly important building blocks for your success?
As a fund, in our first fund, which we had while we were running Blackbird, we were trying to figure out what venture capital was or private equity was, and we invested heavily with, not heavily, with Silicon Valley company. And it was a software solution that by the time they were at their H round, which they all relabel now, they don't get to that anymore,
Right.
but we're going, hey, listen, I know they're growing, but there's no way this company will ever sell for more than we're putting in as an investment. And so why are we doing this? It doesn't make any sense. So I think we just pushed our chips in and said, okay, we're out. I mean, and it ended up selling for just slightly less than the value was at that time. But I think just because other people are doing it, I don't think that's a good reason to do things. And so anytime anyone says, we always do it this way, or nobody can do it that way, then I like to just poke at that a little and see if that makes any sense. So I think we learned from that and we just do what makes sense to us now. So
There's going to be a number of young entrepreneurs or people thinking about becoming entrepreneurs listening to this, and you're in a unique position to give some advice from your extraordinary success. What would you most want a young entrepreneur to know about the challenges and joys of the career that you've had?
I would say find people that you enjoy being with in good and bad, have some clear conversations with them. Don't try to replicate yourself as a partner. You really need somebody who compliments you so you can call you on, if you're not seeing something clearly, and you can have those hard discussions with. But it's more joyful if you can share it with people, I think. But then do all your homework, right? Don't just do it because you want to be an entrepreneur. Find something that, you're passionate about and save up a bunch of money and, don't give away your whole company it's not a pie. You need to think like I love the founding fathers. You need to think of a construct that's flexible enough to get you through and is going to reward everybody for,
Meaning you don't want to give away too much too early.
yeah,
You don't want to get
have a motive.
diluted.
You don't just say you're a third because there's three people at the table. You just have
Right.
some construct that says, well, maybe, we sort of earn into this and it's, if you're not here a year from now, it all kind of rolls back in or, just don't assume that as you begin is how you end.
We know a number of CEOs who are sort of singular leaders. My own life has been more involved with partners. I've found more success when I've had a partner who I can bounce things off of. You're in a partnership. When is there a time for singular leaders, and when is a partnership format better?
Somebody has to make the decisions. So at the end of the day, there has to be, the buck stops somewhere. And so being that person and being someone that the rest of the team will trust to do so, it's hard, right? You can't always share with what you're going through at that point, or else people will lose confidence and start worrying. And so I think those scenarios, or if you just want to do something alone, there's certain points in time where you can't carry, a bunch of people with you. I remember when we sold Blackbird and you look around and all at once you realize that you're not responsible for 900 mortgages, right? So
Right.
that's a point where you just go, it's better. There's some things that you can do alone if you just want to have your own shingle and you just need some peace in space. But I think generally things are better shared.
You know about our Tiger 21 tip jar at the end of every meeting. Is there a book or a habit or a recommendation of a podcast or an app or an exercise or a show that's had an impact on you in recent weeks? What are you reading? What are you seeing? What are you doing when you have time to take a break?
I like pretty much anything Michael Lewis writes. I don't know if you read him, another
Just
Princeton.
about all of it.
Yeah, so he's got some good stuff. And then The Will of the Many was a good science fiction kind of book, I think. And then it was at there was a really good book about Lincoln's cabinet.
By Doris Kearns, that one?
Yeah, that was a really good book. I think building teams across different political parties.
I'll think of the name in a minute, but the essence of the book was that he surrounded himself by his opponents and adversaries, and in that diversity created an
Strong
extraordinary cohesion in the country.
team of equals.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Team of rivals, maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you, we'll put it back in. Is climate change on your radar? Do you have any thoughts about it? And are any of your investments related to it?
No, that and healthcare, I'm hoping somebody else tackles. I acknowledge it as a big problem. I don't think I can take on any more than just saving the country right now. No.
Okay, well, I'll do climate change. You do save the country, and together our kids will have a great future.
Yeah, love it.
Okay. Thank you so much. How can listeners follow your work or any of your thought leadership?
This is rare that this is my second podcast ever, and I only did it because I was inspired by your podcast. So we're kind of quiet, behind the scenes. So
if a young person or a young woman in the security field wanted an advisor, could they call you up and just ask you for a piece of advice?
Sure, piece of advice. I don't have a LinkedIn. I don't have a Facebook, but yeah, try an email. Just start it with Tiger or something that I can pick out, because as everybody does, 500 emails a day.
Great. Beautiful. Peggy, it's been so great having you here. Thank you so much. It's really been terrific.
Pleasure, Michael.
Thank you.
Take care.